Today, I'd like to talk about the purpose of life or the meaning of life. In that, the meaning of life or the purpose is, in fact, life is a morality simulation. And I would posit the question to you to ask you, how would you build a morality simulator? I'd also like to talk about what is free will, as I will define free will as the ability to act outside of God. We'll also talk about if you do choose to act outside of God as your free will, the sadists will argue that God will punish you for acting outside of God's will, and I will give some arguments for why this is not true. Okay, so what's the purpose of life? Or another question is, how would you build a morality simulation? That is certainly what I'm going to argue what the purpose of life is, among a couple of other things, and to also to figure out what kind of person you are. So imagine for this, you're just going to have to imagine that you are God, and there is no reality at this point, right? It's just you, and so you at some point decide to make beings or entities which exist outside of you, which you do not control, which I would define as free will. So free will, the will to act outside of God. It is by your choice that you follow the path of God or follow the path which is not God. And in order to do that, you are manifested in the physical realm, this thing we call reality, and you're not told what any of the rules are. You have no memory of anything else. We all just appear here. Nobody, knows what's going on. There's no real rules set. Now, there are some physical laws, which you kind of define a framework for reality, but that's about it. You could pretty much do whatever you want. There are some laws by man or by person that would have some repercussions to your actions. If we don't care about any repercussions to our actions, you're pretty much free to just do whatever you want. And bad people all the time get away with doing bad things, and there's no repercussions. So certainly, if it's not against a person's law or a country's law, or in corrupt countries when the governments are above the law, they can get away with anything, and there's seemingly no repercussions. So why is this? Well, I'm going to argue that all of reality is a simulation, and it's a morality simulation, because if I was to build a morality simulation, this is exactly how I would do it. Like, I couldn't think of a better way to build a morality simulator. Even if I tried. So think about when, if you were a teenager, or if you are sitting in a court of law or something like that, you're going to act more professional than you normally would, right? It's not that you're necessarily a bad person. It's that you feel that being in a certain setting around certain people means that you have to act a certain way. You have to raise maybe your standard of what you would define morality and ethics are. Or maybe, you're an unethical person and you put on a complete front. And so that's what, if we're all just born into God's house and there's no reality, no physical reality, no four-dimension reality, I would have to imagine, how will we ever, know who we are as individuals, if we are truly good or bad, if we always feel like we have to put on a front, right? Like, if you're always around your parents as a teenager, where as a teenager, you're, going out there and you're making mistakes on your own. You're learning what reality is on your own. You have to go out there and make the mistakes yourself and learn. And you don't do these things around your parents typically, or you're a different person. Or some people do have to be older than teenagers, right? To really experience the world. But at some point, most people will go out there and break a few rules and kind of see the consequence of their action. For me, I'm definitely learn by doing, and you can tell me, something, I'm not going to fully learn it until I do it. Yeah, so this is going to be, really interesting, and I would be curious as to how would you build a morality simulator. So you couldn't have knowledge of God, direct knowledge. You couldn't be understanding that you're born in God's house. You couldn't see any direct repercussions of your actions, right? Because if you saw direct repercussions of your actions, you would immediately stop. So you put your hand on a hot stove, you immediately stop. Why? Because it hurts. But if you put your hand on a hot stove and it causes no pain, you have really no reason to pull it off. You just leave it there and leave it there all day long. So that's kind of the nature of reality, is that you can get away with doing bad things. Certainly, well, you could get away with doing unlawful things, but you could certainly get away with doing unethical things. And we see many things which are unethical happen all day long, and there seems to be no repercussions at all. If you were to build a morality simulator, this is really how it would have to be. If you were amoral and you had a simulation in which every time you committed an amoral action, you were immediately corrected by that which was moral, i.e. God. Well, first of all, how would you learn? How would you grow? And secondly, and how would you know how far down that path of amorality would you really go? Up to and including the most amoral person in existence, probably Hitler, or just a person who is not very nice and maybe just hurls insults like a troll or something like that. We're in this thing called reality, and you can choose to be as moral or amoral as you'd like, and it's really up to you to do that, and it's about self discovery. There you have it. Yeah. So I think that for me, that's what the purpose of life is, until somebody presents some evidence that is better than that, better than a morality simulation created by that what we would call God. It would certainly be how I would create a morality simulator. Like, you have to be able to act upon your own, and you cannot see immediate punishment for your unethical actions. Unfortunately, this hurts people. But yeah, and does God know? Yeah, so of course, yeah, God would know, but it's up for you, for your own, self-benefiting, your own discovery. To discover, the purpose is to discover who you are as an individual. I never thought in a million years I'd be making, videos like these. Like, this is not necessarily my idea of a good time. I don't have the backing of any church or religion, and I'm not necessarily aligning anything with a church or religion, and most certainly churches and religions, I could only imagine, would come out and start attacking me for this line of thinking, because it doesn't line up strictly with any religious text. So but through self discovery and just thinking, trying to find out who I am, and what I think, this sort of thing just, manifested. So yeah, and part of this has come through, a lot of pain and misery and suffering I've had in my life, even though I've tried to, be a good person, do the right thing, and failed, a lot at that. No big deal. So that is where I would define free will as will to act outside of God. So we're given this will to act outside of God. And that is the only way to be a being in existence outside of the Lord. So you have the power over yourself. You don't have power over others. You could kind of influence up to, we'll say, like, we use slavery as an example to fully strip a being of their free will, and even then it's only their physical body. You could strip a being of their free will physically, but mentally, have you also taken their free will away mentally? And there are certainly a lot of stories about slavery where these people were not mentally defeated, right? They would break out into song and dance and things like that. And even the Holocaust, Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, like, the people who were not broken by spirit, survived, even though their bodies were broken completely. So you have the free will to live outside of God, and you can choose how much you want to live outside of God. It could be a lot or a little bit. If you want to exercise your free will to live outside of God, that's certainly your prerogative. And of course, the sadist will claim that if you choose to live outside of God, God will punish you. And of course, that's the purpose of hell, according to the sadist. I don't believe that. I would think of like the idea of teaching your child how to ride a bike. So most people they would make their child wear pads, like a helmet, at minimum a helmet, and then maybe knee pads and elbow pads. And then they would also the learning how to ride a bike is taking the training wheels off. So at this point, you've taken the training wheels off. You've already had that, but at some point, you got to learn how to ride. You're not riding a bike with training. Yeah, you normally go to like a empty, parking lot, or maybe a street with a dead end where no cars drive through. And so it's a safe place, and your child's going to fall, but that's okay. There's no traffic going through, so you don't have to worry about that. And there's all the safety in the world to get you to, walk on your own, so to speak, in your own 2 feet. So this is, God saying, well, I'm giving you free will, and here's a reality to act outside of me and to do whatever you want. And so let's imagine that our child is, wants to enact their free will and doesn't want to take the advice of the parent, right? They're like, well, these pads are stupid, they look dumb, I don't want to wear them, and I don't want to ride on this street, I want to ride down this hill on a much busier street. So imagine you're trying to learn how to ride a bike going, downhill on a busy street with no pads. Well, you're gonna crash, fall, and burn, and that's just the nature of reality. And so, here, from God's point of view, God said, well, I gave you free will. You could act outside of me as much as you want. I'm not going to stop you. And, however, I'm going to give you lots of advice. God gives us lots of advice on, what to do. And it may seem silly, at times, and maybe inconvenient. But at the end of the day, we do reach the destination that we want to in the best possible manner. However, you're free to choose to live outside of God and up to and including to destroy yourself. God doesn't, go out of his way or her way to, destroy you, but you are given free will. And the consequences of the free will is it's up to and including you can destroy yourself and those around you as well. Just think about that, the awesome power that you are given. That we all have power, that, you're probably at a job where you don't have much power, you're just told what to do, or you're at school, you have very little power, you're told what to do. In a household, it's, your friends or family members may or may not listen to you. You could be very powerless in your day-to-day life, in your dealings with other. Never forget that God has given you an immense amount of power that maybe... you just don't see that it's difficult to see. Because if you've already chosen that you're a good and ethical person, that's an immense amount of power right there on you that you have in your day-to-day life. And it's a great thing. So the purpose of life, to really discover who you are, morally speaking, and you have the power of destruction in your hands. And it's given to you, or the power to live outside of God. And the nature of reality is that if you're living outside of God, only brings destruction. The sadist will, of course, claim that this is God's punishment. I would argue that, God is not so petty that it's not punishment. It's just the nature of reality, right? You could choose to ride your bike with, safety gear in not dangerous conditions, or you could certainly go downhill, full speed, no safety equipment whatsoever, busy street. And if you get hurt, it was your choice. It was your choice to do that thing. You were given that will, and you chose to do, that thing.